you can't help but get 2,000 different hands involved,
Yeah.
where you're just dealing with layer upon layer of people that need to have their input. With Daredevil, I mean, it's not like Daredevil isn't an inconsequential character, but he isn't he isn't a high-profile Spider-Man, Wolverine.
Right.
And so there's a little more freedom, I think, that the creators get to do, and develop a character that's more innately interesting, other than trying to make sure they check off all these boxes on like, well, is this going to appeal to the guys who love comic books? Is this going to appeal to people who don't read comic books? It's like, no, we're going to make a very compelling character. And my wife loves it. She'd never heard of Daredevil before.
She likes it?
Yeah. And she thinks it's like, hey, I watch and I don't even know who this guy is, like in the Marvel universe.
Oh, it's very, there were a couple episodes. I was watching, the one I watched last night, I'm right in the middle of the season. Episode 5, where they're sitting on the step after dinner, and there's this like really intimate moment between Karen and Matt. And I was thinking that, man, this is like a level of not like a comic book show. Like, the acting is really, really, really good.
The acting's good, but the scripting's amazing. It doesn't feel hackneyed.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's so easy to fall into these tropes.
I mean, it is tropey. I'm not going to say that it's not tropey.
Well, it can't help but not.
Yeah,
but be
it's a superhero thing. It's it's part of the baggage. But I was saying to Jen is like, the characters in this, other than kind of the supernatural bent that's part of it, like, hey, there's a vigilante running around this really, this part of town that's beating up all the bad guys and stuff. That's not out of the realm of possibility. Not improbability, but just like, hey, I believe a guy gets really angry and just, goes around in a ski mask thumping on, organized crime. I'm not sure he would survive, but
I really enjoyed their take on Frank Castle. I think the Punisher was really, really well done.
Think of every Punisher movie they put out, starting with the Dolph Lundgren one and ending with that British actor where they shot everything in Montreal. They were all crappy. The Thomas Jane one. They were all. The problem is they wanted to make the guy likable in all those. There's like some aspect of him. It's like, no, that's the whole point. He's just he's a guy that's literally crossed the line, and there's no point. There's no point where he's going to turn back.
I do think it's kind of sort of
we
funny.
Gotta start the show. Sorry, guys.
Oh, okay. Oh,
sorry.
Yeah. There's a show.
You ready, Darren?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt such a great show.
Didn't we? Yeah, I know. We have to interrupt their show to do this show. That was a good show. I'm just like, yeah. I'm not gonna lie.
We'll return to your regularly scheduled
after
the show.
All right, here we go.
Tech News, a daily frontier to explain advancing technologies and how they affect you, to seek out new gadgets, apps, and picks of the day. These are the continuing missions of the Daily Tech News Show. But Tom and the crew can't do it alone. To help keep DTNS on the cutting edge of news and lovable, goofy, curmudgeonly commentary, visit dailytechnewsshow.com/support to show your support. Now let's hear that other theme song.
This is the Daily Tech News for Friday, March 25th, 2016. I'm Tom Merritt. Joining me today, Mr. Darren Kitchen at hack5.org, hacking his way through your lives and into your hearts.
Yes, and your email sometimes.
Well, occasionally. For good.
Letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to tell my coworkers, I read your email. And what it meant was, like, the ones you send me.
The ones you send me, right, exactly.
I was the email administrator, so they might have taken that a little off. Anyway.
You know, I hack your email. I mean, that means I spell check it and then send it back to you with corrections.
Oh, man, you know who else is hacking together some epic artwork?
Mr. Len Peralta is with us as well. You can find his great works at lenperaltastore.com. How are you doing, Mr. Len Peralta?
I'm doing well.
Oh, I'm so formal with you today.
I don't know. I don't know why. You know what? It's because it's Easter weekend, and happy Easter weekend to everybody out there who celebrates Easter. It's Good Friday today, and it's going to be a great Friday.
It's the best
because
Friday.
Darren and Len are here. with
You know, it's
Tom.
funny. I've been watching the Spanish national television broadcasts every day to try to help brush up on Spanish. Top story, like a front of the Brussels news. Top story was like the parades and the celebrations and
Oh,
everything. And
right. Yeah.
huge. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it was huge, but I didn't realize it was how huge it is in
Oh,
Spain.
it's
It's crazy.
huge. It's
Yeah.
enormous. It's enormous.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about how 17 lines of code being removed from one place can bring down a huge chunk of the internet. And that's kind of by design, I guess, Darren? Is
Yeah,
that
it'll
fair?
be fun. We'll kick that one around.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We're actually going to beat around whether it's a bad thing or not. But let's start off with the headlines. Netflix admitted Thursday it reduces the default bitrate of its streams to viewers that use AT&T or Verizon in the United States down to 600 kilobits per second. Netflix normally streams somewhere between 3 and 5 megabits per second. Megabits per second. Back in May, Netflix intended to release coming up in May. I get unstuck in time. Coming up in May, Netflix intends to release a data saver application that'll let customers choose what video quality they receive on mobile. There's a similar thing that you can do on the desktop, but we don't think it affects your mobile streams. T-Mobile limits streaming of its partners like Netflix to 1.5 megabits per second. That's around 480p. And Sprint used to restrict streaming video to 600 kilobits per second, but they stopped doing that last year. And Netflix says, well, Sprint and T-Mobile have more customer-friendly policies, so we don't throttle them, but we do throttle AT&T and Verizon.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I think that Netflix it's well within their rights to make that decision. And actually, this stream, if you're watching live now, may go up or down based on network conditions, and that's a very normal thing. I know many video engineers that do this exact thing, where there's you try to maintain a constant quality, but you vary the bit rate depending on those conditions. And I feel like if Netflix wants to do this, that is totally cool. Just like if they wanted to respond to a terrible ISP that has some bad net neutrality, questionable practices, they could 360p that whole network, or even preface every stream with a annoying message about how terrible their ISP is, and maybe they should look for alternatives. It's well within their rights, because ultimately, the FCC net neutrality laws only apply to the ISPs.
Well, yeah, exactly. And a lot of people want, especially the carriers, would like you to think this is also a net neutrality violation. The whole point of net neutrality, whether you're for it or not, is the pipes that carry things are neutral. And you, as someone who sends things through the pipes, can send anything you want as fast or as slow as you want. But the pipes, if they say, well, we'll deliver it no matter what it is at this rate, will be capable of doing that. It's basically like, I can't think of a good metaphor for it right now, but it's basically like I can go on the highway, and the highway is rated for me to drive up to 65 miles an hour, but I can drive 45 if I want. I don't have to drive 65 miles an hour. And I'm not violating the highway rules if I do.
I also love the fact that AT&T, which is also trying to avoid paying its own $100 million fine for throttling, says it's outraged by Netflix's quote-unquote, air quotes here, throttling. Yeah.
I don't want to give Netflix a complete pass here, though. If I'm an AT&T subscriber, or I used to be, and I used to be a Verizon subscriber, I would like to have control over that, because Netflix isn't doing this because of network conditions. Netflix is doing this because they say they don't want their customers to run up their data caps. Let me make that decision, please, which is what they're going to do in May, but I kind of don't like that they didn't tell me they were doing this.
Well, they do the same thing where they determine, okay, so this is very similar to what they do when they determine your geolocation. They may say like, oh, but we see that you're dialing in from France now, so we're only going to give you the French bits, even though you may be a U.S. citizen on holiday.
Yeah, I think that's different, though.
I don't know. It's the same kind of idea. They're like, well, based on the...
No, because they're doing that because of the content that they're getting, not because of you. They're saying they're doing this because of me, and I'm like, don't do me any favors. Give me control. The content providers of the movies that they run and the TV shows they run won't let them run them outside of geo restrictions. That's a whole different situation.
So if you're an AT&T wireless customer, all you have to do is watch Netflix through a VPN that makes it look like you're a T-Mobile subscriber.
Yeah, and done. Bob's your uncle. Can you
He's
make
your
it
mother's
look like
brother.
T-Mobile? I guess you could tether. Anyway, whatever. Fortune says multiple sources tell it that Snapchat has agreed to acquire Toronto company Bitstrips. If you don't recognize that name, maybe you'll recognize this one. They make Bitmojis. Bitmoji lets you create an avatar that looks like you that can then be worked into various one-panel cartoons that express thoughts or emotions, kind of like super emojis. There can be one of you jumping up and down yelling yay or happy anniversary or let's do this or I'm late or whatever. They're very popular amongst the hipsters.
Wow, a company that's based on allowing you to embed an inline image.
Yeah,
I should draw those.
16.
What the nifty thing about Bitmoji is they're pretty good at creating that thing that lets you make an avatar that looks like you, and so people like it because it automatically creates lots of different ones of them.
I
Yeah,
should
I
draw
mean-
those, man.
I'm just thinking, I mean, that's great for Snapchat, but people should think about all the NCSA Mosaic users that won't be able to enjoy it.
Yes, think of both of them. Remember when I said Bob's your uncle? He's the one still using NCSA Mosaic. Google has made its Nick collection free. Nick collection is a set of 7 photo enhancement tools which can be used as plugins for Photoshop, Lightroom, or Aperture. Bundle used to be $149, but anyone who bought it this calendar year can now claim a full refund, and going forward, everybody can get it for free. Nick collection consists of Analog Effects Pro, Color Effects Pro, Define, HDR Effects Pro, Sharpener Pro, Silver Effects Pro, and Viveza. Why that one's not Effects Pro, I have no idea. Google acquired Nick software in September 2012 in order to get the Snapseed app, which they still make.
I just think it's really interesting how Google tends to do this whenever they make changes in the market. They give refunds a lot. They're like they're not sweating the small stuff, it seems.
There's already people suspicious, like, does this mean they're getting rid of the Nick collection because they made it available for free? It's like, well, I don't know, maybe. But don't look a gift horse in the mouth, at least yet. France's CNIL, the National Commission of Information and Freedom, which is their data privacy regulator, has fined Google 100,000 euros for not providing full protection for people's right to be delisted from search results. Google removes requested results under the right to be forgotten laws in Europe, but only for users whose IP address is determined to be in France. Google will appeal the ruling. This is an interesting case, right? Because you may want to be on Google's side of like, hey, if somebody in France wants to be forgotten, it shouldn't change the search results in the United States, which doesn't have the same laws. But what the CNIL is pointing out, Darren, is an IP address is not a location. And therefore, they're not saying you should block it for the United States. They're saying, we don't know about that. All we know is that people in France can use a VPN and then see these listings, so you're in violation.
Or are the people in France just on virtual holiday somewhere else and seeing the real internet? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not for censorship of any stretch of the imagination, but I'm also not a citizen of France. You know, I'm a citizen of the United States, and my alt passport says the internet. So, I mean, I just reject the notion that any territory would impose its rules upon the entire world in that regard.
And I think that's the cleverest thing about what CNIL has said. If you read it closely, they're not saying our rules should apply in the United States. They're saying our rules should apply to French people. And since a French person sitting in Paris using a VPN can see that link that's supposed to be forgotten, you're in violation. You tell us it's hard to fix. I don't know. We're just following the rules. The rule says this, and you're in violation.
Well,
like, it's kind of bullshit, but it's also kind of brilliant.
If a French person goes to New Zealand, are they still a Frenchie?
Yeah, and I'm curious what the CNIL would think of that, but they're not even addressing it. Like that's what I mean about how clever.
No, they're
this
going
is.
about it like a 5-year-old trying to get their way. Using child logic.
No,
saying,
but it says
this.
It says right here.
Yeah. Without any regards to the rest of the world.
Apple Senior Vice President of Internet Software and Services told the New York Times Thursday that Apple is working with Will.i.am, Ben Silverman, and Howard T. Owens on a television series documenting app makers. Apple has previously worked with partners like Vice to make series related to music, so this isn't brand new territory for Apple, but it's the first time they've ventured outside of music. Silverman brought the ideas to Apple. He is an executive producer of many hit television shows, including Flaked on Netflix. Q said, quote, "This doesn't mean that we are going into a huge amount of movie production or TV production or anything like that. And yet, despite all these things I just said, most of the headlines read, Apple starts first TV show, not true, going into original content head-to-head with Netflix, according to Q, not true." So there you go. Verizon reported an attacker used its enterprise client portal. You really didn't have anything to say about that, huh?
No, I don't know
that's
why.
fine.
I don't care.
It's totally fair. Totally
I
fair.
had to look up who I thought will.i.am was a domain name, so I'm a little bit behind. I was like, wow, how do you get i.am? That's
All
a
right.
good TLD and stuff.
He should, actually. That'd be a steal. Verizon reported an attacker used its enterprise client portal to steal contact information on approximately 1.5 million customers. The attacker did not get access to the metadata on phone calls. That's something called customer proprietary network information. It's stored in a separate area. Krebs on Security reported that someone posted the contact information for sale on a forum, and that's how this was made public. The vulnerability in the portal has since been fixed, and only enterprise-level customers were affected, not your normal phone users in Verizon areas.
This is fantastic, wouldn't you say? I mean, I think this is going to, like we should eventually prepare ourselves for the massive data dump that will be all of the text messages for a carrier for a certain amount of time.
This is just contact info, though. I mean, this is kind of a boring attack. This all they got was email addresses and mailing addresses. I think.
But it makes me hopeful that eventually there will be that massive data drop of people's text messages, because it will then encourage better digital hygiene, right? I mean,
well, here's what I would call hopeful. And maybe I'm being Pollyannish here, is that this would be the warning that Verizon should probably stop that. But again, this was also enterprise level. Right?
No, people aren't going to heed the warning that has been told to them for decades now until they're actually exposed and start using end-to-end encryption messaging. Like, well, pick your poison. There's a million of them out there right now.
Maybe someday. Recode reports multiple sources say Microsoft has been holding exploratory meetings about financing efforts to purchase Yahoo assets. Earlier this week, Yahoo shareholder Starboard Value launched a proxy challenge to replace the current Yahoo board of directors because the sale process has been slow. Microsoft does not seem interested in becoming the majority owner, although Recode reports sources saying AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast are all rumored to be interested in being the majority owner of Yahoo, and maybe Microsoft would go in with one or several of them. Basically, what it sounded like, according to Kara Swisher, is Microsoft's talking about maybe putting $1 billion in. Yahoo's asking for $10 billion. They're estimated to be worth $6 to $8 billion, so they'd get anywhere from a seventh to a tenth of the company if this all ended up being true.
So you think it's like AT&T and Verizon, Comcast, they're all like thinking about ordering a pizza. They're like, yeah, we're thinking about getting the Yahoo one. You want to get Microsoft? You're good for a kick. And they're like, we'll take a slice. Well, and
Microsoft's like,
slice.
I don't know. What are you guys going to put on it?
Yeah.
I might go in for a slice, but what are you getting on it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Is it going to come with Oscar Mayer meats?
Yes.
No. The Verge reports that pre-orders of the Oculus Rift headsets are now shipping. CEO Brendan Uribe tweeted a pic of a boxed headset saying that deliveries begin this coming Monday, March 28th. Rift can still be pre-ordered, but your delivery won't happen until July at this point. The $600 Rift bundle includes the Xbox One controller and Eve, Valkyrie, and Lucky's Tale as bundled in games.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, hardware is a necessary part of this whole ecosystem, but what I'm most excited about is kind of what we're going to see now that these units will be getting into people's hands before the F8 developer conference on, I think it's the 12th and 13th next month. So that's where I'm hoping to see some more content stuff.
For sure. And finally, researchers at the University of Illinois, go Illini, report that they've achieved a record-setting transmission of 57 gigabits per second of error-free data over fiber. That's right. Maybe we're not in your sports ball tournament right now, but we're setting records in fiber speed. Go Illinois. Sorry. That's without cooling either. By the way, at 85 degrees Celsius, transmissions still remain 50 gigabits per second. So they're thinking they could use this in places where cooling is impractical, might save money on cooling data centers. Team was led by Professor Milton Feng with Professor Emeritus Nick Holonyak Jr. and graduate researchers Michael Liu and Curtis Wang on the team. And Gadget's John Fingus points out the trick will be to make this work over long distances. They did it in a lab, but they didn't do it over miles.
My thoughtful conclusion, Tom, is that them be some hot bits.
Yeah, man. 57 gigabits per second. I'll replace my hub. I'll replace my router.
57 gigabits per second of 85 degrees Celsius bits.
Yeah, no cooling necessary. That could be amazing. They were talking about using it in airplanes. because you think of airplanes as cold because the outside is cold, but a lot of the actual airplane networking sections are very hot. So yeah, cool stuff. Go Alani. Submit your stories, folks. Vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. It helps us push the show together every single day. We couldn't do it without you. Well, we could, but it wouldn't be as good. So don't make the show worse. Go vote. dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. And that's a look at the headlines. All right. Where do we start?
Well, it's open source, so there's no wrong way to do it. I'm assuming
right.
Reporting on the story, there's no wrong way to do it.
Let me commit. Should I commit? I think I'll go with the short version that I put in here. The background things that you need to know are that NPM is a private company in Oakland, California, but it is also the largest registry and repository of JavaScript tools and modules. If you don't know what tools and modules are for JavaScript, and by the way, these are open source, the tools and modules are things that you can point to instead of having to write the code from scratch every time, right? If you've done any kind of object-oriented programming, you know that is incredibly necessary. You don't want to have to write every single thing code does from the ground up every time.
Yeah, there's this whole concept of DRY, or don't repeat yourself, and so don't reinvent the wheel is basically what it's saying.
Now, what's happened is, because NPM is very large, very successful, and open source, I don't know if it's most, but a huge number of modules are hosted by NPM. It is the default packet manager for Node.js, in which much code is written. So there's a guy named Azure Kochulu, and I'm probably not saying his name right, so I apologize, but Azure is the author of several modules, one of which is called LeftPad. LeftPad allows write justification of text. You can also prepend characters of any choice. It is a dependency in a large package called Babel, which has a line numbering tool that uses LeftPad. Now, a lot of people use Babel. Kochulu, in a dispute about the name of another package, just gotten a bit of a tiff with NPM and said, I would like to unpublish all my modules, including LeftPad, and he did. When he did that, code across the internet began failing because it referred to Babel, which referred to its line numbering, which referred to LeftPad, which was no longer there. And within 10 minutes, it was fixed. Cameron Westland had published an equivalent of LeftPad under the same name, but it took about 2 hours to sort out the implications, things like version numbers, etc. So a lot of people panicked, and now a lot of people are mad because even if it was just for a couple hours, they feel like I can't rely on NPM anymore because NPM allowed this guy to pull his package out. And then there's, of course, the fight over the name, which we can get into that in a second, but it was a company said, well, we want to use that name because it's the name of our product. And Kochula's like, well, no, I use the name first. It's open source. Sorry.
Right, and a lot of people claimed, like, this broke the internet, and I don't buy that whatsoever, because it makes me really wonder, like, who are these people that are blindly updating packages on a production server? Like, I mean, come on. You've got to, I mean, there's some blame to go around, but, you know, who's the guy that brought down the production server? Cause,
right, and that's why I keep saying a chunk of the internet, because it was a large number of people complaining about this, but it wasn't like every instance of JavaScript suddenly stopped working. You would have noticed that.
Right, and you know, this is also inherent to basically anything in the cloud, as it were, because the cloud, while very convenient, can be sometimes volatile. There have been outages in the past of other online services that make it difficult to get business done. I know I rely on Google Apps, for instance, and when I can't get to Google Drive to open my docs and spreadsheets and stuff, it can be a real bummer. But I accept that risk when I go into that relationship with that company. The interesting thing here is that the developers are entering into a relationship not with other developers, but with the company by proxy using NPM service. NPM being that company out of Oakland that maintains the repository for other people's open source code. So if you write a project and you're like, all right, I'm going to write this awesome Node.js project and I'm going to reference other people's code, and rather than copy and paste and all that stuff, I always want it to get the latest version. I always want it to be really easy for other people to install. I'll just point to NPM's version of it. And NPM holds that little namespace, which is the little name of the project, and then makes sure that it references the good stuff. This isn't unique to NPM either. Many languages have to deal with this thing. Go is dealing with it. Every language. What's different here, though, is that unlike I'll use another package manager as an example. Python, another very popular programming language, uses pip to install packages very similarly. Pip, on the other hand, is not a privately held company, rather an open source project, which means it's inherently decentralized. There's not like one guy that can make like a decision and just yank some stuff. There's a committee. And every package manager is different, but the difference here is that if you're a Node.js developer, you may be not realizing that you're entering into a relationship with NPM, the company, and not necessarily the developers on the other end.
Now, and here's where it gets interesting, because I'm not sure that the fact that NPM is a private company is really the problem here, especially based on just what you just said. I think the problem was the policies. NPM runs this registry as an open source registry, and yes, it does have a private company and behind it, but so does Swift. Swift doesn't have any problems. Swift isn't even that open, really, but it's run by Apple. So I think the problem was that NPM has a situation where they will allow you to remove the packages. And Stratton, the founder of NPM, says there's very good reasons why we want people to be able to remove their packages. At the same time, there was no safeguard against this sort of thing. There was no, I guess they just never run into it, so maybe it's not that frequent of an instance, but there was no way to say, well, hold on, that package is actually referenced a lot, so we need to do something before you're allowed to remove it. You can remove it, but we need to take steps to not break other people's stuff. There wasn't anything like that. And if you want to get into the details, essentially what happened was Coachalo wrote a module called Kick. A company called Kick Interactive that makes the Kick messenger wanted to name their module package Kick. They said, look, people are going to be looking for modules named Kick if they're developing for Kick. So on March 11th, Bob Stratton of Kick emailed Coachalo asking, hey, would you mind renaming your Kick to something else so it doesn't cause confusion? And Coachalo said, sorry, I'm building an open source project with that name. Now, there's the first problem. Coachalo not going, well, wait a minute, I'd really rather not. Just sort of like, nope, not going to do it. Stratton then wrote, our trademark lawyers are going to be banging on your door. Boom, poured gas on the fire. And that was the real problem there. He started threatening the lawyers. And of course, then Coachalo says, F you, I'm not going to do that. So Stratton appealed to NPM. And I incorrectly called NPM's creator Stratton earlier. NPM's creator is Isaac Schleuder, who looked at this and said, well, Kick's got a good point. It's their name. It's going to cause confusion. People are going to be looking for Kick Messenger, and they're going to find this other thing. I'm going to give the name to Kick. Flames are already burning at this point, so that is a questionable decision at that point to do that. And I think that's where, well, there's not a committee. There is just one person making the decision is a problem. Sent an email to Coachalo explaining. Coachalo said, great. I would like to delete all 273 of my modules. And to Schleuder's credit, he said, well, I'm not going to treat you any differently just because I'm disagreeing with you. Here is the command to do that. And Coachalo deleted them, and hence havoc ensued. Of course, GitHub still had all the copies of them, and we had Cameron Westland run to the rescue. So in some senses, this is a victory, which is like, hey, we only had a 10-minute absence and only a 2-hour period of uncertainty.
Right. The difference here, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that as opposed to a more decentralized open source project, pick any, there's so many package managers, Yum, apt-get, Pacman, Pip, whatever have you. It's not like one guy, Isaac, making a call like, well, yeah, they have a trademark, and you're using if KIK was more popular and it had been used in Babel and many other projects like that, they might have been like, well, we could just give the namespace KIK to the company Kick, or we could tell them, hey, it's already being used by somebody else. It's first come, first serve. You can call yours Kick Messenger, because otherwise we would be breaking things, and people looking for that dependency would get the wrong thing.
Yeah, and I think if NPM, and I don't get the sense that NPM wants to be a bad player. They're trying to be a good citizen, and they usually are seen as a good citizen. I think they would be best to create some kind of foundation. Maybe that's going too far. Maybe it just needs to be a committee, but some kind of external operation of the open source community here, because NPM is too big to have one person making that decision.
Well, but yes, just because they're too big right now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that alternatives couldn't exist for that thing. And part of the problem
That's
is
the other way to go, right?
If you're just learning to program Node.js, you may in fact think that NPM, because it's called the Node package manager, has an affiliation with Node where it's a separate company. And so I think that it's worth pointing out, because I'm not calling them evil, but I am saying there should be room for alternatives, and that's the beauty of open source.
Right.
And an alternative did attempt to exist back in February of 2014, and looked for an available name on NPM. It was an alternative to NPM. And of course, it wanted to be listed in NPM so that so that you could download it, right? And it was called.
Yeah.
And so they looked for a name, and the developer found that NPM.js, that namespace, hadn't been taken. So they went and just published that. And so it had been available for 4 years. Moments after that was registered, the developer got an email from this Isaac character over at NPM saying, "Hey, dude, that's not cool. Change your name." And he's like, "No, it was available." And the user license, the EULA, was updated to basically say that the NPM registry can remove your stuff at any time at our sole discretion, just for this instance, essentially.
Yeah.
And then said, "I wasn't asking. We're deleting your stuff. Move it."
Yeah.
And the interesting thing there was it was a competitor in a way. I mean, it would have made NPM more popular, but it was expanding on the APIs and such like that. And so it really makes you wonder, like, okay, are they like open source, like let's all make betterment of mankind, or are they open source, like let's own this stuff?
Yeah, and so I do think that NPM should do the right thing, spin this out, make it an actual open source project, or there is now enough anger out there for a movement to create an alternative method, which is the other way to do it.
I think that this brings up something interesting in regarding to what we were talking about in France. Is what if I, not an NPM, but any other repository, I write some code, and it's really janky code, and I got my name all over it, and I get really embarrassed later in life. I'm like going to job interviews, and people are Googling me and finding this just terrible code that for some reason is in all these repositories. Would the right to be forgotten in the EU not apply to that lousy code? So I think this is just bringing up a pain point that the open source community needs to figure out what is the best way to do this. And since every package manager does it different, sometimes the developer isn't even the maintainer in the package. So
it's not like we haven't dealt with namespace issues. I mean, going back to the rise of domain names, there's a good model for how to manage namespaces. So it is a solvable problem.
Yes.
Let's get to our pick of the day. As tax season approaches in the United States, many of you may need to get documents to your tax preparer. The safest way to do this is to carry them in person, either on a very secure USB drive or print it out in person, even better. Hand them in person to your tax preparer. That is not always practical. We understand that. So Philip Shane sent this Lifehacker article as his pick for determining safe ways to send sensitive documents during tax season. The first one in this Lifehacker article is hand them to the person in person. But let's say there's a situation where the person, for whatever reason, just can't do that, Darren. There's some good recommendations in here. What do you think?
I'm going to disagree and actually say the recommendations in here, which are only two, which are AES 256 encrypt a volume using like 7-zip or some other like zip archiving tool. That's when you do that, what you do is you're using symmetric encryption, and now you have to share that key with the other person through typically an alternative means, which we call out of band. So you'd call them on the phone and say, like, hey, I sent you all the tax documents. Here's the password for that zip file. And while that may be really convenient, it's still not the best tool for the job. The other one that they recommend is Dropbox. I don't recommend using third-party services to do your encryption for you. I say use the open source standard, use PGP. And so just ask your accountant, what's your public key, give them your public key, and then load it into Enigmail or whatever program you use for that and do it that way. And I also realize what I just said isn't practical whatsoever.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, I have worked with many different tax preparers in my time. Some of them would actually had public keys. Most of them don't. Yeah. So then you have to figure out your workaround system for that. But be careful. I think Dropbox encryption is recommended by Lifehacker with the caveat of, hey, you are putting your encryption in somebody else's hands. So if you're worried about Dropbox someday handing that over or being hacked, you should be aware of that. It's all levels, right? And so I think you're right, which is encrypt it yourself, get a public key from the accountant is the best way to do it. But
It's also
when that tax accountant's like, I don't understand those words, you're gonna have to figure something else out.
It's also a matter of knowing from who you're mitigating the risk, right? So the idea that if you're using a third-party service like Dropbox, I'll just point this out, that, oh no, the government might subpoena my tax information from the Dropbox and they'll give it to them. Well, you're going to give it to the IRS anyway.
Yeah,
so,
the IRS already has that information. So,
yes.
Yeah. Send your picks to us, folks. Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com. You can find more picks at dailytechnewsshow.com/picks. Got some great messages. A listener wrote in and said, TLDR, I'm a digital forensics examiner. I couldn't hack that iPhone 5C. The FBI might just be busy. Celebrite is pretty awesome. Sorry for letting this email get away from me. But it's a really interesting full email about this person's experience as a forensics examiner, having worked with law enforcement, not actually in law enforcement, in private operation. Here's some excerpts. He says, or she says, I don't really know. My understanding is that the FBI and most law enforcement agencies have a long backlog of digital evidence to work through. At times in my career, it's gone back a couple years. That could explain why they didn't just jump on this in the first place. If an encrypted iPhone comes into my lab, my course of action is to ask the attorney or the custodian of the phone, often their client or the opposite attorney's client, for the PIN or passcode. If they can't get it, I just say, sorry, we're not going to be able to get to the data. We have too many cases to futz around with this stuff. Also, I would bet that very few cases come up that are such high priority that they can dump as much time and manpower into them as they have with this case. It's a very different kind of case. A lot of nice things said about Celebrite products for data extraction from phones. And then finally, maybe the takeaway should be that we computer forensics people aren't superheroes like the guys on CSI.
So I feel like this probably already exists as a meme somewhere, but imagine the first graphic is what you imagine about FBI forensics investigators, and then there's an image of the FBI. And then underneath it, it says the actuality, and it's the DMV.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as offense to any investigator.
To either the DMV or the FBI. It's just somebody overworked and underpaid, probably.
Yes. And if the FBI could afford better InfoSec professionals, we may not even have been having this discussion.
Yeah.
But that's a different problem altogether.
We'll have the full email if you're interested in a comment in the show notes doc. Nick says we've been mentioning that you can use the existing PlayStation Move controllers for the PlayStation VR if you already have them. And Nick says, hey, it's worth pointing out, you should test your battery. The Move controllers batteries don't last forever. In fact, video game journalist Jeff Gersman of GiantBomb.com has been getting a lot of messages from people saying they've used they've had used or sometimes brand new Move controllers from the PS3 era with batteries that can't hold a charge. Apparently the batteries used in the Move didn't hold up that well over years, and sometimes batteries don't. Even new Move controllers might have been stored in a warehouse for several years, and the batteries may be bad. So be careful about that. You might want to test that controller.
This is a problem not just with the PlayStation, but really anything. I noticed the other day that my local coffee shop uses an iPad to control their very sophisticated PA system, and it docks in a station that only uses a 30-pin connector iPad. And so I was thinking to myself, wow, I really hope like in a temperature-controlled box somewhere they have spare iPads with 50% charge or something.
Yeah. And then Yaniv said, after reading some of the tweets and hearing some discussion about Tay, Microsoft's artificial intelligence that became very racist on Twitter, Yaniv says, I think it was a huge success. If I was a psychology major, I would be calling Microsoft for the data. This is an example of how a teenager thinks and how easily he or she can be manipulated to believe in different things. I hope Microsoft does not filter Tay or modify her algorithm to make her more immune to trolling. Have a different AI, but Tay is a really interesting case study. Microsoft actually apologized for Tay today, by the way. The company said it had implemented a variety of filters and done stress tests with a small subset of users, but opening it up to everyone on Twitter led to a coordinated attack, those are Microsoft's words, which exploited a specific vulnerability in Tay's AI, though Microsoft didn't elaborate on what that was. Microsoft's taking responsibility for it. They're saying we should have tested better, but they're saying we did do tests. We just didn't realize that people would be able to team up on it. I think the coordinated attack is probably less a coordinated attack and more a bunch of people seeing each other doing this to Tay and all jumping in the pool at the same time.
Yeah, one kid starts poking on the other kid at the playground, and other people jump in because they want to be part of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is a great show, Darren.
Thanks,
you.
Man. I had a lot of fun.
HAK5.org, as always. What do you got going on over there?
Oh, we have an amazing series going on right now where we're teaching you from the ground up how to build your very first quadcopter. We're going over all of the basics of flight and avionics and all of the components and how to put together stuff using open source and open hardware. And it's really a lot of fun. Shannon and I are doing a lot of learning and teaching, and we should be flying here real soon. So you've got a couple episodes back to catch up on, and you'll be right there with us soldering along. So HAK5.org.
Len Peralta has been busily illustrating Node.js. How are you doing there, Len?
One of these days, I'm going to be able to handle one of these esoteric stories in a good way. This actually is that was a tough story to draw today, but the story actually was about rage quitting, because that sounded like what the programmer done. So that's what I did. I drew the little rage quit guy who's saying, "Internet, I break you," and then at the bottom it says, I don't know if you can read that or not, programmer takes 17 lines of code off the internet. You won't believe what happens next. Yes,
you won't believe line 13. That's brilliant. No, Len, you always say, like, I don't know what I can do with this, and then you always nail it. Like, this is the heart of the story, which is the programmer getting so upset that he's like, I'm going to delete all my packages.
Yeah. I love the table flip too. It's so great.
So
exactly. So you can actually go look at this at lenperaltastore.com. It's there on the front page right now, or you can go to my Patreon and go to patreon.com/Len, and you can get it that way, a digital thing. Oh, and I do want to mention one more thing before we go. Next week on Wednesday, 3/30/16, my issue of Munchkin from Boom Comics will be going out into comic stores everywhere. You can actually pick up the issue that I wrote, illustrated, and did the cover for. So it's very exciting. I was talking to Tom about this before the show. I'm working with Tom on comics and other folks on comics, and this is the first comic that's not self-published, that's actually in stores. So you can go out there, support it, and get out there, and then go to your comic book store.
Go into your local comic book store, go find Munchkin, and then point at it and say, I know that guy.
Yeah, that's right. And if you do that, take a picture, put it on Twitter, and let me see you doing that, because I would love to see people going in the comic book stores on the 30th and picking up my comic.
All right, folks, would you like a UK perspective on the tech news, perhaps? Why not check out Nate Langson's text message this week? Give him a reason why, Nate.
Thanks, Tom. Have you ever felt the pain of changing cell phone providers? Well, in Britain, it's no less painful than elsewhere in the world, and it's just been proposed that an entirely new British regulatory body be set up to change that, making the process of switching carriers close to a one-click task. Could that work? Could it be something other countries adopt too? And what's Apple's embedded SIMs got to do with all this? We'll be discussing the proposal and what it could mean for the future of phone networks this weekend at textmessage.co.uk or simply techpodcast.uk.
Thank you, Nate. That's not the only international take on the news you can get. DTNS itself will have a Day 6 episode this Sunday from Australia with Peter Wells. If you want to see that go weekly, or you want to get us to the next milestone of a monthly roundtable show of DTNS, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/DTNS or dailytechnewsshow.com/support. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. You can give us a call, 512-59-DAILY. It's 593-2459. Catch the show live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern at alphageekradio.com and diamondclub.tv. Visit our website, dailytechnewsshow.com. Back on Monday to talk about bots with Matthew Hartman and Veronica Belmont. See you then. If I'm not a bot by then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Tight show.
Yeah, it was really good. I just had a brilliant idea for any package manager that doesn't support the ability for the developers to just go and delete their code off of the servers. They still, of course, allow them to update the code. So we should just standardize the practice from now on. If you just want a table flip, just push an update that replaces your code with 10 print and then the Unicode table flip guy and a URL to Len Peralta's awesome drawing. 20
Problem solved.
That's hilarious.
Suddenly, packages across the internet are showing table flip guy
and Len's drawing.
There you
and
go.
Len's drawing. Yeah.
Well, you would print you know what you would do? You would send table flip guy to standard error, and then standard out you would send the URL, the tiny URL to Len Peralta store. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that idea.
I just love the idea of like accounting software across the nation breaking and people like calling Len like, hey, what's going on? How come I can't run the reconciliation report?
That's amazing. DTNS required tech news.
Oh, okay. Is it? I have to pull this up. This is gonna be good.
Yeah, showbot.tv.
I can imagine Showbot is just teeming with good stuff
Well,
today.
it's T2T2, so that one's syntax is dead on.
Yes.
The right to forget really lousy open source code.
Semicolon, depending on the language. I don't know, man.
Oh, that's true.
We might
That's
have to. I'll send him a pull request.
He
on
left it.
IRC.
Yeah, all right. 10 print table flip guy, by the way, is already a title suggestion now.
Oh yeah. The problem is you can't use that kind of Unicode in a file name on. I mean, you could, but you.
I could. I've done it before.
You have.
And it's been fun dealing with the help
Windows
requests.
users. Is that why, Tom?
No, it was Android. Some Android podcast aggregators did not like it at all.
That's surprising. I would have expected it to be more widespread. I don't know.
Yeah.
What about France's safe space?
France's safe space.
It's
France's safe space is the entire internet, apparently. Oh, it's because of the 5-year-old thing.
Yeah.
I get it. Took me a second. Yahoo
Pizza.
Pizza.
I like Yahoo Pizza. The 11 most important line. No, I don't think they're the most important lines.
really fast fiber. Fiber in your diet really speeds things up.
It sure does.
But you can use that for any fiber story.
True.
Apple
Netflix throws
TV
down the gauntlet.
channel.
They really want me to screw up people's aggregators because 10 print table flip guy is now winning.
Yeah, Microsoft is being a Yahoo should be Microsoft Bing a Yahoo.
Oh.
That's good.
Those are some hot
17
bits.
ways to break the internet is not bad.
Well, I mean, anytime you begin with a number, which in which case 10 print table flip would work, because it begins with a number. You're gonna click it. It's clickbait. Top 10 most reasons internet broke.
It's not the numbers at the start that causes the issues though.
I've got it. Here's what we do. We take all of the suggestions, we Google Translate them literally to French, then we Google Translate them literally from French to German, and then from German back to English, then we use one of those.
Sounds brilliant. You want to do that?
Yeah, unfortunately 10 print table flip guy is going to come out as 10 print table flip guy.
Yeah. Well, print might change at some point. I don't know.
You're right.
Might. I say might.
Drucken and...
I need a name. What are we calling it?
Inferior? I feel like inferior. I can't pronounce that. It's French.
DTNS required tech news.
Yeah, that one's
That's
good.
kind of I'm leaning that way. Yeah.
You got to escape the quotes though. Put a backslash before each quote.
I do.
No, I'm joking. But
Oh.
you didn't put quotes file name.
I'm only half my brain's here because I'm actually typing. Sorry.
All right, guys. Well, I have to log off because I have to pay a FedEx bill.
Oh, all right. Well, tell FedEx. Thanks.
Yes. And everybody have a nice weekend. And
Thank you. Happy Easter to the
Happy Easter, Len.
Yes, please. Yes, and everybody have a happy Easter as well. And we will talk to you next week.
All right, man.
All right,
Sure.
take care. Bye.
Bye.
I got to give props to Beatmaster. Will I am be a URL? I don't know. I didn't say anything because I'm so like under a rock in terms of media.
Yeah. Well, what happened to me was that I knew you didn't have an X by it,
Yep.
and I knew you weren't saying anything, and I just let the pause go too long. And so when I started the next story, I was like, okay, I got to explain that pause. So I was like, so I had to call it out.
In my notes for the Netflix story about the variable bitrate, I actually used T-Mobile as my mobile broadband at my apartment. Because I'm there so infrequently that if I do want the internet, I'll tether on my phone. So I have like a phone that I just use to tether to a Chromecast. And I've been, for the last 2 weeks, just watching like plenty of Jane Fonda movies, and they stream just fine on T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have T-Mobile on my phone as well. I use it as my tethering on the road, and I've streamed Hulu and Netflix and stuff, and it's been fun.
So if it were a reference to like Jane Fonda or Jane Powell or Frank Sinatra or Cary Grant, I would have gotten those. I'm just a little behind on the more recent stuff.
Sure. No, that makes sense. will.i.am started music in the 90s. So just start back there.
Okay. I'm going to start with the 90s and work my way up.
If I say Black Eyed Peas, the band?
I know the Black Eyed Peas. Yeah.
He's the guy from Black Eyed Peas.
Oh, well, there you go.
So there you go. See, we've solved it now.
So, hey, Darren, do you see a web browser in place of my face?
Yes. I would actually get that looked at, to be honest.
So no, not Darren. We have to ask.
We have to
ask the audience. Yeah. So when I or Darren are talking, do people in the chat room see the web browser that Roger has? And you've clicked on yourself, I'm guessing, Roger?
I have.
Oh, okay. Right, because we don't see the TD output. We just see.
We don't see live.
Ah. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure there's a cream for that, Roger. But
it's not focused on Roger though. Maybe if you click
they
on
see it. Well, yes, I know that will work because that's how I do Len. But what I was hoping. Oh no! Wait a minute. We didn't give you control room.
Oh no! You didn't give me control room.
Okay. Now.
No, they didn't remove control room. I heard they did.
No, I'm presenting to everyone. Now, does everyone see it as a full screen?
Now, when I talk,
do
people still see Roger as or the web browser instead of me? I'm going to talk and wave my hand so I can see it on DiamondClub.tv.
Yeah. I only see the web browser now, except for you in the thumbnail, of course.
Okay, so now they're saying it's forced on me.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that works.
All right.
Now unclick it, and it should flip back and forth between the three of us.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, he's no longer present.
So if I start talking, it should have
then
Windows 10.
Right.
Okay.
So what we need is whenever you want to cut to the web page, you just get some smooth music coming from Roger. Huh? Maybe some like Girl from Ipanema or something.
I hate that song.
Okay, well we'll use Tom's Diner.
Which one? The one that was originally done by Suzanne Vega, or the one that was remixed by DNA, I think?
And then remixed by like everyone else after that, I believe. I don't know. I'm down with the original. Or you know what? Throw in some will.i.am.
Yeah.
Through the course of the podcast, I'll start with the 90s and work my way up.
Right. Well, I was thinking Black Eyed Peas, so if you just want solo will.i.am, you don't even have to go that far back, I don't think.
Oh, there you go. Oh, wait. That's the one with Fergie, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She's a doll.
She is, isn't she?
Yeah.
I still am curious what she was going to end up doing with all of that junk.
Where was she keeping it?
It was, if I remember right, it was in her trunk.
You know, last time I had this issue, we ended up illegally dumping it in West Oakland.
Oh, see, now that's that's not good. You should probably have a garage sale or something. I wonder if anyone ever suggested that.
Yeah, I don't advise that, by the way.
You can just take it to the dump.
Yeah, in fact, the El Cerrito Recycling Center will probably take it. They've got
that's a responsible thing to do with the junk in your trunk.
Yes.
Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, Roger, you can do that during the show. Keep yourself mute, so that it doesn't switch to you automatically if it hears a noise. But then just click on yourself to show the web pages. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, I have to click on present to everyone. You have to give me control, and then I click on
I have to give you a control room, and then yeah. Okay.
And once
you want me to be seen but not heard? How very Victorian of you.
I mean,
And you're going to go
when you put
16
it
by
that
9?
way, it doesn't sound that nice.
Right now you get a little 1:1 aspect ratio going on. I mean, if you're going to have your face be a browser, you might as well go with a modern ratio.
I mean, seriously, right?
Modern ratio is merely a preference informed by contemporary values.
Okay, fine. So keep going with your Instagram ratio, and we'll call it a day.
It's a day.
I won. It's just,
Huh? You know, the parens did not translate, and the quotes didn't translate into the URL.
Ah.
It's probably a good thing.
so does that fill out how far this goes?
There's an article today about a woman whose last name is Null, and all the trouble she has.
That was the other thing I was going to say is if you couldn't table flip by removing your code, you could just replace it with null.
Yeah.
But it's open source, so people could always just revert back.
There's I can't remember her first name. I'm going to say Elizabeth. I don't think it was. But she married a guy, and he said, look, you don't have to change your name. It's going to be a real pain in the ass. And she was like, no, I'll change my name. And so she's like, it's been a real pain in the ass. The one thing that I remember from the article is she has to call the airline to book a flight. She cannot do it online.
She should change her name to / quotation mark null / quotation mark, and everything would be fine.
It's a good idea, actually. I wonder if her doing that when she filled out the forms would fix it. It shouldn't it? Maybe. Or she might trip off a cross-site scripting.
Or yeah, that's just about to say, like little Timmy drop tables. We all remember him. Script guy. He's quite popular.
Little Timmy drop tables.
You know the XKCD for that one, right?
Yeah.
So good.
I forgot all about that.
I've seen there's a great meme that's been around for quite a while of a person driving through a toll booth that uses OCR, and it's got their license plate followed by a quotation mark semicolon drop tables. So good.
Oh, that's so good. Did you know that Randall Munroe's the book? I can't remember the name of the book now, but it's the book he did where he explained. Yeah. It's going to be in textbooks.
Oh no!
Houghton,
really?
Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. They all merged, so they all have different names now.
Okay.
Has licensed it to put into their chemistry, their biology, and their physics textbooks.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was actually a really good explainer of the thing.
Yeah. I read it uses proper syntax. I don't know why.
Like the upgoer is just about the I don't think I've ever been beaming more smiley than after reading the upgoer. It should be required reading by all 5th grade students in science.
They are using the pieces everything is made of, which is the periodic table, and bags of stuff inside you, which is the human torso.
Oh man. It's between that and the fact that like John and Hank Green get played in schools today that I actually have like hope that
for humanity.
Just that this country can turn its education around, and it just so happens not even from the private sector as much as the public, like just us people, like, hey, we need to make better go, and then go will better be. Whoa, indeed.
I think the finalists of 24 are going to be profiled. Oh, there's a book about Creative Commons update. Nice. There's a book being made called Made with Creative Commons.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm making one of those right now.
I'm doing that too. Right this
I'm like several books behind you, but I'm making.
Well, I'm not making a book about it. I'm actually making something that's Creative Commons.
Yeah, you're making a Creative Commons book, right?
Well, I'm making a Creative Commons licensed video and audio file. Right this second.
When are you doing it?
Right now.
Right now? Now?
Yeah.
What about then?
Also.
Okay. I'm gonna stop before we go plaid.
Seriously.
Ludicrous speed.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. I am out of the post. Someone asked me on Twitter, they're like, why do you say you're out of the post? What does that mean? And I was like, I guess that isn't clear. I have a blog post that I create to publish the show. And once I'm out of it, I say so that Roger can go in and do things to the post. That's all that means. Goodbye.
Bye.
Boy.